In the last episode, we followed the 5 sons of Shem. They built the ancient Near East. Elam became Persia. Ashur became Assyria. Arphaxad carried the covenant line toward Abraham. Aram gave the world its trade language. These were the Semitic peoples. But Shem had 2 brothers. Their names were Ham and Japheth. Together, these 3 men fathered the entire human race. Genesis 10 records their descendants. It is a list of 70 nations. Scholars call it the Table of Nations, and nothing else like it exists in all of ancient literature. William Foxwell Albright studied it for decades. He concluded that it stands absolutely alone. No other ancient document comes close. Not the Cimmerian king list. Not the Egyptian execration texts. Not the Assyrian royal annals. None of them maps the human family the way Genesis 10 does. Those other documents track kings and conquests. Genesis 10 tracks families. Every nation, one family. That is the claim of this chapter. And archaeology keeps proving it right. Researcher Bill Cooper spent 25 years checking every name in Genesis 10. He found verification for every single one. No errors. No invented peoples. Every tribe, every territory is confirmed through ancient records outside the Bible. This is not mythology. This is history. Before we follow Ham and Japheth, we need to understand one structural choice. Genesis 10 comes before Genesis 11. The nations are already scattered before the Tower of Babel is even built. That seems backward. And it is intentional. The Hebrew writers often did this. They showed the result before they showed the cause. Genesis 10 is the effect. Babel is the explanation. Keep that in mind, because everything that follows begins at one tower, on one plain, with one family that refused to scatter. Ham had 4 sons. Their names were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Each name became a civilization. Let us begin with Cush. The Hebrew word Cush appears 56 times in the Old Testament. In most cases, it refers to the vast territory south of Egypt. This is the land we now call Sudan and northern Ethiopia. Ancient Egyptian texts called it K3Shi. They knew it well. By the New Kingdom, Egypt had colonized Cush. They appointed a viceroy to govern it. Then Egypt collapsed, and Cush rose. The kingdom of Cush built its own steep pyramids. It developed its own writing system. It produced powerful rulers. One of them, Taharka, sent his armies north to challenge the Assyrian king Sennacherib. His name appears in both 2 Kings and Isaiah. And in the New Testament, a high official of Cush heard the gospel on a road near Gaza. Philip baptized him on the spot. The promises of God had reached the ends of the earth. But Cush is larger than Africa. Some creation science scholars propose that early Cushite clans settled near Kish in southern Mesopotamia. From there, one branch turned southwest and crossed into Africa. That would explain why traces of the name Cush appear in both regions. It would also explain Nimrod. Genesis 10 pauses the genealogy. It stops to tell us something urgent. Cush fathered a son named Nimrod, and Nimrod was unlike anyone who had come before. The text calls him the first man on earth to become a mighty man, a mighty hunter before the Lord. He built a kingdom. It began at Babel. It expanded to include Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. Then he moved north and built Nineveh. His name tells the whole story. In Hebrew, Nimrod comes from a root meaning to rebel. Add the prefix, and it means we will rebel. Most scholars believe this was not his birth name. It was a title, a judgment pressed into history. The phrase before the Lord is not a compliment. Ancient Jewish translators read it as against the Lord. The Jerusalem Targum is direct. Nimrod was a hunter of men's souls. He told people to abandon God's authority and submit to his own. He was the first empire builder, and his empire began with defiance. Scholars have proposed several historical candidates. In Merkur, a Sumerian king of Uruk is one strong option. His name contains the Cimmerian word for hunter. Sargon of Akkad matches the geography exactly. Gilgamesh matches the legend. The debate continues, but the pattern is clear. A powerful man rose. He built cities. He centralized power. He placed himself at the center. That pattern has never stopped repeating. Now the second son of Ham, Mizraim. This is Egypt. The Hebrew name Mitzrayim is in the dual form. It means two Egypts. This matches exactly what the Egyptians called themselves. Taweh, the two lands. Upper Egypt to the south. Lower Egypt is in the delta to the north. The word appears in Akkadian tablets from the 14th century BC. It appears in Ugaritic texts. The modern Arabic name for Egypt, Misr, preserves this same ancient root. Ancient tradition connects Mizraim to Menes, the first pharaoh of unified Egypt. Whether that specific connection holds or not, the broader identification is solid. Egypt is the legacy of Ham's second son. Mizraim's descendants spread across the Mediterranean. Lehabim became the Libyans. Naphtahim settled the Nile Delta. Pathrusim moved into Upper Egypt. Caphtorim colonized Crete. And from these descendants came the Philistines. Genesis 10 verse 14 says the Philistines came from the Casluhim. But other Old Testament texts say they came from Caphtor, that is, Crete. Which is it? Both. Kenneth Kitchen proposes two waves. The first wave was early. Peaceful settlers from the Egyptian delta moved into southern Canaan during the time of Abraham. These were the Casluhim Philistines. The second wave came much later. Around 1200 BC, the Sea peoples swept through the Aegean. A branch called the Peleset arrived from Crete. These were the warriors of Goliath's era. Two waves. Same name. Very different peoples. The third son of Ham is Put. Put is a mystery. The ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament identifies Put with Libya. Josephus agreed. Bill Cooper traced his descendants across North Africa into Mauritania and Morocco. Ancient prophetic texts pair Put with Egypt and Libya. The Western African identification has deep roots. But modern Egyptologists connect Put to the legendary land of Punt. This was Egypt's great trading partner. Gold, ebony, ivory, frankincense, and myrrh. Egyptian queens sent fleets to reach it. Recent isotopic studies of Egyptian artifacts have located Punt along the East African coast. Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Libya, or East Africa. Both traditions have ancient support. What makes Put unique is what is missing. He has no listed descendants in Genesis 10. His brothers have extensive lineages. Put has none. Scholars suggest he settled far from the Israelite world. His tribes merged quickly into broader confederations. They faded from the written record. But they were there. God did not forget them. The fourth son of Ham is Canaan. Canaan settled the land the Bible calls the Promised Land. He had 11 sons. Each one founded a tribe that archaeology has confirmed. Sidon became the great Phoenician port city, documented in Egyptian diplomatic records and in Homer's epics. The Hittites of Hate appear throughout patriarchal history and across northern Syria. The Jebusites built the original city of Jerusalem. David had to conquer it from them. The Amorites held the hill country west of the Jordan. Girgashites appear in Hittite documents. Hivites lived near Shechem and Gibeon. 6 more tribes stretched north: the Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. They lived in Lebanon and Syria. This is why Joshua's conquest only reached 7 of these nations. 6 were in the far north. They survived as Phoenician and Syro-Hittite city-states for centuries afterward. Now we must address a lie. For hundreds of years, some people claimed that Genesis 9 placed a divine curse on dark-skinned Africans. They called it the curse of Ham. They used it to justify slavery. This is wrong, and it must be said clearly. Noah cursed Canaan, not Ham, not Ham's other 3 sons. Canaan alone. The descendants of Canaan settled the eastern Mediterranean coast. They were not African peoples. Ham's other sons built some of the greatest civilizations the ancient world ever knew. Egypt, Nubia, Mesopotamia. These were powerful, flourishing peoples. The racist interpretation of this passage is not only morally evil, it is biblically false. It has no place in an honest reading of Scripture. Now we turn north. Japheth had 7 sons. They moved away from the center. They pushed outward. Into the mountains. Across the steppes. Over the seas. No family in ancient history covered more ground. Gomer led the way. We know him from Assyrian records as the Gimari. The Greeks called them the Cimmerioi. In English, the Cimmerians. They rode out of the steppes north of the Black Sea. In the 8th century BC, the Scythians pushed them south. The Cimmerians poured through the Caucasus passes. They crushed the kingdom of Phrygia. They killed the king of Lydia. They burned the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Eventually, they faded from the record. But the memory of their name did not. The Armenian name for Cappadocia, Gamir, comes directly from Gimari. Scholars track their descendants westward. The Gauls, the Celts, the Germanic peoples. Gomer's 3 sons spread further still. Ashkenaz became the Scythians of the northern steppes. Togarmah settled eastern Anatolia. Armenian and Georgian chronicles still claim Togarmah as their founding ancestor. Riphath moved toward the Black Sea coast of Paphlagonia. Gomer's second brother was Magog. No name in the Table of Nations generates more debate. Josephus identified Magog's descendants as the Scythians. Others connect the name to the Akkadian phrase Mat Gugu, meaning the land of Gyges, placing Magog in western Anatolia. Medieval Christian maps place the terrible nations of Gog and Magog behind iron gates in the Caucasus. Now, you may remember something from our earlier episode on Shem's sons. We said that Lud, the 4th son of Shem, became the ancestor of Lydia. And that is true. By the time of the Great Lydian Kingdom, the population was deeply mixed. Semitic Luddite settlers, Japhetic Cimmerian and Phrygian migrants, and indigenous Anatolian peoples had all layered together across centuries. This is how the ancient world actually worked. Peoples moved. Borders overlapped. A territory could carry the name of one ancestor and the blood of several others. The Table of Nations gives us starting points, not sealed borders. In Genesis 10, Magog is simply a patriarch, a son of Japheth, equal to his brothers. But Ezekiel 38 gives him a different role. There, Gog rules the land of Magog. He leads a great northern coalition that includes Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah. By the time of Revelation 20, the imagery has expanded completely. Gog and Magog are no longer a single ruler and a single land. They are a symbol, a gathering of all the forces of final rebellion from the 4 corners of the earth. History becomes prophecy. Prophecy becomes symbol. The same name carries all 3. The 3rd son of Japheth was Madai. This one is certain. Madai is the Medes. Assyrian inscriptions from the 9th century BC name them exactly. A fierce people of the Zagros Mountains and the Iranian Plateau. Their capital was Ecbatana, modern Hamadan. The Medes grew slowly. Then they exploded. In 612 BC, the Medes allied with Babylon and destroyed Nineveh. The great Assyrian Empire fell in a single campaign. But the Median Empire did not last. In 550 BC, Cyrus the Great of Persia defeated the Median king Astyages. Persia absorbed Media. Yet the Medes did not disappear. They became partners in the new empire. The Greeks still called the Persian wars the Median affairs. Scripture itself speaks of the law of the Medes and Persians as a single, unbreakable code. 2 peoples, 1 empire. And this was the world that Daniel, Esther, and Ezra knew. The 4th son was Javan. Javan is Greece. The Hebrew Yavan matches the Akkadian Iamnea, the Old Persian Yauna, the Greek Ians, the Ionians. These were the seafarers of the Aegean. They gave the ancient world philosophy, geometry, and democracy. They built the maritime networks that bound the Mediterranean together. Javan's sons extend the network outward. Elisha is Cyprus, known for its purple dyes traded with Tyre. Tarshish is the far western Mediterranean, likely the mineral-rich colony of Tartessos in Spain. Kittim covers Cyprus and later becomes a term for Rome itself in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Rhodonim settled the island of Rhodes. Genesis 10 verse 5 calls these peoples the coastland peoples. The isles of the nations. They spread by sea, and by sea, they changed the world. The 5th and 6th sons of Japheth were always named together, Tubal and Meshech. In Assyrian records, Tubal is the land of Tabal in southeastern Anatolia. Meshech is the Mushki. They were real kingdoms. Sargon II fought them for years. He named the Mushki King Meda. The Greeks remembered that same man as King Midas of Phrygia. These were powerful Anatolian kingdoms, not distant empires. Some modern teachers claim Meshech means Moscow. That Tubal means Tobolsk. These ancient names predict Russia in biblical prophecy. This identification is popular, and it is historically weak. Moscow first appears in written records in 1147 AD. Tobolsk was founded in 1587 AD. Hebrew prophets of the 6th century BC could not have been naming cities that would not exist for 2,000 years. Josephus placed both nations firmly in Anatolia, modern Turkey. The geographical and linguistic evidence agrees. Whatever Ezekiel's vision ultimately points to, Meshech and Tubal began in Asia Minor. The last son of Japheth was Tiras. Josephus connected him to the Thracians. This remains the strongest identification. Thrace occupied the eastern Balkans, north of Greece. Herodotus described the Thracians as fierce and red-haired. Linguists find traces of Tiras' name in the Thracian river Athyrus. Some scholars connect him to the Tercinoi, a maritime Aegean people, and through them to the Etruscans of Italy. But recent DNA studies have shown the Etruscans were native to central Italy. The Thracian identification stands. Japheth's sons followed two great paths. Javan and Tiras set sail. Gomer, Madai, Tubal, and Meshech crossed mountains and steppes. Together, they filled the Indo-European world. Modern linguistics confirms it. Greek, Latin, Persian, Sanskrit, Germanic, Slavic all share one ancient ancestor. And the geographic sweep of Japheth's sons matches that spread almost exactly. Step back now. Look at the whole map. Ham's descendants built the civilizations of Africa, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. Japheth's descendants spread across Anatolia, the steppes, Greece, and the wider Indo-European world. Shem's descendants established the ancient Near East and carried the covenant line. 70 nations. One family. The Apostle Paul stood on Mars Hill in Athens and declared it plainly. God made every nation of humanity from one man. He determined their appointed times. He set the boundaries of their dwelling. God did not lose track of the nations when they scattered from Babel. He placed each of them exactly where he intended. 70 nations were disinherited, but one family was kept. That family was Israel. Not because Israel deserved it, but because God had a plan. Through that one family, he would reach all the others. And so he called Abraham. We already learned about Abraham, who left Ur in response to God's calling. But the calling of Abraham makes no sense without the table of nations. Why would God need to call one man from one family? Because the whole world had scattered. The whole world had gone its own way. The mission was always global. 70 nations were scattered at Babel. Jesus later sent out 70 disciples. That is not a coincidence. It is a declaration. Every nation that was lost at Babel is the target of the gospel. And at the end of history, John sees a vision. A great multitude. No one could number them. From every nation, every tribe, every people, every language, standing before the throne. Together. The divisions of Babel are not erased. They are redeemed. The story God wrote in Genesis 10 does not end in scattering. It ends in gathering. Ham's grandchildren are there. Japheth's coastland peoples are there. Shem's covenant line brought the message that brought them home. One family, broken at Babel, gathered at the throne. That is the table of nations. In our next episode, we will learn about the Septuagint, who translated the scripture into Greek. When and why? What is the difference between the Hebrew scripture and the Septuagint?